In book 2 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle is going to tell us all about moral virtue, or as it's sometimes translated, character virtue. And he's going to do this because he's trying to fill in this outline of the human good that he gave us in book 1, chapter 7 of the Nicomachean Ethics. According to Aristotle, happiness, the human good, is virtuous rational activity. And while that's true, it's somewhat uninformative as far as it goes, because we don't know yet what the various virtuous, what the various virtues are and what the rational activities that they govern are. And so in book 2, he's going to start filling in those details by telling us about one kind of virtue, namely moral virtue. And so then the idea is that this gives us a clearer account of what exactly happiness is, of what exactly we should be aiming at as we live our lives. Now, in book 2, the way he proceeds, he addresses 3 questions in order. And so this is how we're going to proceed. First, so this is in book 2, chapters 1 through 3, which we read. He's going to tell us how the moral virtues are acquired. How do we get them? So they seem very important. You need to have them in order to live a good life, to live a flourishing, happy life. Well, how do we get them? That's what he's going to tell us about in book 2, chapters 1 through 3. Second, he's going to tell us what, in general, a moral virtue is. Think of it this way. He's going to define what a moral virtue is. If someone were to ask Aristotle, what's the definition of moral virtue? That's what he gives us in book 2, chapters 5 to 6. So we're going to look at that. And then the last question that he addresses that we're going to look at is, what are the particular moral virtues? So, okay, we know how they're acquired. We know what in general a moral virtue is. We would know how to define that phrase, moral virtue. But what are the moral virtues? That's what he's going to tell us about in book 2, chapter 7. So first, how are the moral virtues acquired? Aristotle gives a fairly straightforward answer to this. He says, well, we acquire the moral virtues in the same way that we would acquire an art or a skill, in the same way that we learn those. And by art or skill, what he has in mind would be things like, it'd be a variety of things. A lot of things fall under this banner, but learning an instrument, learning how to paint, learning carpentry, right? How to make a table, how to use the saws and whatever. Learning how to play guitar, stuff like that. Learning how to farm, learning how blah, 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 blah. Those are all arts or skills. And he's saying we acquire moral virtues in the same way that we acquire arts and skills. In the same way that you learn carpentry, that's how you acquire the moral virtues. Well, okay. How do you acquire arts and skills? Right? That's the obvious next question. And what Aristotle's going to say, and this is very plausible, it's not just Aristotle who would want to say this, you learn how to be a carpenter by doing carpentry, right? You don't just, well, whatever, we'll get to it in more detail, right? You learn how to make a table by making tables. And yeah, maybe it doesn't go so well at first, but that's how you learn to do it. You learn to play the piano by playing the piano. Yeah, that's how we learn arts and skills. You learn these things by doing them. Well, okay. So what if I had the following thought then? I thought to myself, oh, that's great. All you have to do to learn something is just do the thing. Well, that's great. You know, I got some kids, and you know, I'd like them to be skilled and artful in all sorts of ways. And so maybe I get the following idea, right? I'm going to teach I got a baby. Well, he's not really a baby. He's walking around, but he's still like fat and short and can't really talk. So it's kind of a baby. I want to teach my baby, my whatever toddler, how to play the guitar. right? I think that'd be great. He likes the guitar. I'd like to, sit back on a cool summer evening and just listen to my virtuoso, 1.5-year-old, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to teach him how to play guitar. You learn how to play guitar by playing the guitar. Okay, great. I got a good idea. I'll go. I got a pretty big, big enough closet, I guess. So I'll go to the closet in my house. I'll bring my baby. I'll kick my baby into that closet there, and I'll throw him the guitar. Yeah, and I'll slam the door, and I'll just leave him in there for I don't know, an hour or so, a couple times a day, every day a week for a few months. I don't know how long it takes, right? But if I just do that, right, and you give him the guitar or whatever, he starts, he tries to make noise with it or whatever, okay, right? He starts playing it. So is that what you're saying, Aristotle? If I just do that, that baby's going to know guitar, or whatever, toddler's going to know guitar in a few months or whatever? He's playing the guitar. Well, no, right? Obviously not. In addition to, having CPS called on me or whatever, I never actually do that, right? Okay. He's not going to learn the guitar at all. He's just going to hit the thing, and he's not going to come out knowing anything about guitar. Why? Well, because the answer is obvious, but it's important to draw out. You only learn guitar if you're being taught it. Yeah, you have to play it, but you play it under the guidance of a teacher. You can't just hit the guitar in any old way. You have to do it in a very particular way, right? You need to know this is how the chord goes, or these are where the scales are, and this is how you do that, right? You need to develop very particular habits in order to learn how to play the guitar, right? And you practice those very particular kinds of habits. Same thing with carpentry, same thing with painting, same thing with everything, right? It's by developing very particular habits, by doing very particular actions under the guidance of a teacher, that you learn an art or a skill, right? You can't just do it any old way. And here, the kind of obvious example of a teacher would just be another human being that you go to who knows the skill in question and directs you, right? You go to a guitar teacher and they say, do it like this, do these exercises, whatever. But teachers can be, a teacher could be broader than that in this particular, right? A book that shows you chord formations and shows you what the scales are, and you look at that, and right, that's a teacher in a sense, right? Somebody wrote it who knew how to play guitar and wrote it to teach, right? It's like a teaching instrument, and so it kind of takes the place of teacher. That's fine, right? That's what you need. That's how you acquire an art or skill, right? You don't just do it any old way under the guidance of a teacher. Well, so in the case of moral virtue, then, what's the story going to be? Take justice as an example of a moral virtue, right? So we're going to get to the list of moral virtues later, but just to give us some examples to work with so we kind of know what he's talking about, the moral virtues are going to include things like courage, temperance or moderation, generosity, and here the example I'm using, justice. Justice is a moral virtue. And we all want to be just people. We want to acquire that virtue. That's acquiring that virtue is essential for happiness, according to Aristotle. Okay, fine. So how do we acquire justice? Well, we acquire it in the same way that we learn an art or a skill. Well, how do you do that? Well, by doing the thing in question. So you become just by performing just actions. That's Aristotle's answer. But what's crucially important here is that you need someone to guide you. Who is our guide to justice? Who guides our actions, making sure we're just? And here's where we start seeing why Aristotle thinks it's so important how we're raised from a very young age. Our teachers of the virtues, of the moral virtues at least, are our parents. We start developing habits from a very early age, right? We start developing habits for justice or injustice from the time we kind of start acting. And so Aristotle's idea is that, well, look, you become just by performing just actions, and you're going to be guided to perform those just actions by your parents. This starts early, right? So for example, you have kids playing or whatever, yeah, and one kid takes a toy from another kid, right? Little Johnny takes the toy from little Susie. I don't know, right? And you're little Johnny's parent or whatever, right? what the parent what you should do as the parent, Aristotle would say, is you need to correct little Johnny's behavior there. He's doing something, I mean, not to jump all over little Johnny here, but he's doing something unjust. He's taking something that's not his. He's not sharing. He's not being fair, right? He just took this toy that little Susie was playing with. Um, And so, what the parent would do in such a situation is guide little Johnny's action, right? So, no, 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 don't take the toy. That's unfair. Give it back, right? Little Johnny, you're being unjust. Give the toy back, make him give it back, right? That's the kind of guidance that Aristotle has in mind that begins very, very early. And so, our teachers of the virtues are our parents. They form our habits, because more generally, what Aristotle is going to say, if you wanted to put it in a word, how do you acquire the virtues? Habituation. How do you acquire an art or a skill? Habituation, right? How do you learn how to play the guitar? Well, by becoming habituated to whatever those hand positions and holding down the frets in those places or whatever it might be, right? You develop the muscle memory for it. We might not typically call it a habit or habituation. We call it something like muscle memory, but that's just a habit, right? You habituate your fingers to do that kind of thing, and there you go. Now you can kind of play guitar. Well, it's the same thing with the moral virtues. It's by habituation that we acquire them, right? You do the just action over and over and over under the guidance of a teacher, namely your parent. Your parent makes you always give back the toys that you take, makes you always share or whatever it might be. Over time, as you're being raised, you develop the habit for justice. That's how you become a just person. That's Aristotle's answer as to how the moral virtues are acquired: by habituation, by being forced to do these actions repeatedly.